Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. In today's show, we're looking at the battle against transnational repression. In the Americas, the World Sikh Organization lobby the Canadian government hard to prevent resetting trade relations with India until the issue is dealt with. In the UK, the Parliamentary Human Rights Committee is given unambiguous instructions from the Sikh community about what they need to do about it. And as the anniversary of 1984 fast approaches this weekend, in our ongoing look at the continued fallout from the massacres of that year, we discuss the essential work being done by various archiving bodies like ENSAAF, amongst many others. Even today, still trying to reveal the truth. And there's no escape for the UK government either, as it finds it increasingly difficult to wriggle off that hook as calls to launch the inquiry into its involvement in the events mounts ever higher. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. And just to show that we're listening, and Angus has no idea what's about to pop up on the screen, so let's check this out. Now, we took you up on your challenge. Here is AI and what the AI system would envision.
Hey, marvelous.
Mr. Angus Scott So a little something funny and, lighter hearted to start our weekly show. So there you go. Some iterations of what AI would have pictured Angus as. So there we go. A little something different to keep us going on this Friday. And of course, I had to do it to myself as well. So here's an old photo here. And if I changed it over. So there we go. Just something a little different to start the show off and show you that we do pay attention to your comments, folks. Thanks for all the amazing comments. And back to you, Angus.
What a handsome pair of young Singhs, I would say, we make, James. But of course, being AI, you should remove the grey from the beards, just as one suggestion. If you're going to use it well.
It keeps us looking distinguished, Angus.
Absolutely right. And indeed, gosh, that's rather thrown me slightly, but I think marvellous to see that. But yes, on with the show. James and I together today will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And indeed, of course, talking about your comments, we'll take a look at loads of your fantastic comments. There's some really interesting comments coming over the last few days, so we'll take a look at those at the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. Right, James, loads to get through as always on today's show. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, as we were aware, the Mark Carney government is not wasting any time. Now the Parliament has been recalled, and of course, King Charles III was there for the honour of giving the throne speech this year, the speech from the throne. Only the third time in, of course, Canadian history since we became our own independent nation that the monarchy has been there to do it. However, with that said, of course, there is a new cabinet, and that includes Anita Anand as our foreign relations or foreign affairs minister. And she's already stirring up some controversy. She has recently reached out to India and her counterparts there to look at reinstating negotiations and resetting the Canada-India relations. Of course, the World Sikh Organization has reached out and really criticized the fact that she described the conversation with her counterparts in India as productive and, giving some positive future insight to it or hopes anyway. And that, however, has brought concern about foreign interference and, of course, transnational repression being overlooked by at the hands of India by the Canadian government and the new minister that is in place. We need to keep in mind that whether it is Hardeep Singh Nijjar or other instances of foreign interference, we cannot allow, or transnational repression, we cannot allow the India government to get a simple pass and allow them to skate by on these accusations and the potential involvement that they had in these deaths on Canadian soil, on, potential potential assassination attempts in the US and other things in the UK. We need to hold them to account, and that was left out of any conversation that they had. And of course, with the World Sikh Organization bringing that to task, they called out and said that it was a slap in the face, essentially, to all Sikhs and all minorities in Canada who face transnational repression. Now, of course, the Hindu Canada Foundation came to the defense of Anita Anand, and they stated that the World Sikh Organization was actually bullying her, and that they didn't represent all Sikhs, but emphasized the benefits of India ties. We know that in today's economic uncertain times right now, especially with trade wars and tariffs and everything else, Canada is looking very rapidly to expand the trade presence around the world. They are looking to really open up the markets internationally and stop the sole dependence on trade with the US and, of course, our large market there. However, it should be also noted that, as Angus, you and I talk about on the program quite often, we've been very critical of the UK government in terms of placing trade before human rights and before the holding to account the India government for their actions. And now it seems that Canada is following pace on that to place the monetary potential before that of the Sikh community or the human rights that are, of course, being avoided or ignored within India. Now, of course, we need to keep in mind that, yes, it is a new day. It is a new government in Canada, but it cannot, and especially being still a Liberal government, it cannot overlook the seriousness of this, and also the fact that the previous Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, spoke out publicly in the House of Commons. He spoke out publicly in the media, and most importantly, he spoke out in defense of our Sikh community in Canada. And for that to be overlooked in terms of the risk that he took in doing so in international diplomacy, in international trade, and of course, putting himself on the line for a community because he firmly believed that it was an important issue for the Canadian government to stand up to international tyranny. And for them to not bring it up and for it not to be an issue within the current context of trade, that is, again, something that Canadians should all be concerned about. And of course, the World Sikh Organization, they have demands to the Canadian government, and that is nothing that we would think any less of. We encourage this because of the public inquiry. We need they would like to see a comprehensive inquiry into Mr. Nijjar's death and, of course, the targeted violence by India and others, including the Lawrence Bishnoi gang across Canada. They are seeking immediate action, suspending intelligence sharing with India, which seems very reasonable to me, and to combat anti-Sikh hate, which they want to see a dedicated federal strategy, data tracking, and law enforcement responsiveness. This, of course, is very important, and I do believe that the RCMP, with the announcement of 1,000 new officers being brought on nationwide, as well as into the federal pool, I think that they will be looking at the law enforcement responsiveness very seriously, and I do believe they will address that part of it. But again, with it being recognized there, and then also looking at recognizing the 1984 Sikh genocide and giving it a formal recognition by the Canadian Parliament should be also at the utmost concern or priority over really, appeasing India by opening up the trade relations again and trying to reset all of the diplomatic and other relationships that we have, Angus.
This is, when we talk about lobbying, this is an absolute, I suppose, a textbook case of lobbying and how effective lobbying is and how public lobbying can be. We've got two very clearly polarised sides in this discussion. We've got the Sikh community and we've clearly got Hindutva in the form of the Hindu community. The World Sikh Organisation is doing exactly what all Sikh organisations around the world, certainly around the diaspora, are doing, and certainly here in the UK, seeing very similar lobbying, very powerful, very effective lobbying against our respective governments. I'll talk about ours in a moment. But certainly there in Canada, this story actually did in fact even reach the news over here to some degree in the sort of the minor sections of Anita Anand's meeting with Jai Shankar, and of course the huge backlash that caused amongst minority communities, but of course not least of all the Sikh community, who of course quite justifiably so rose their voices in anger, saying, look, you're talking trade deals before you're talking human rights. We in Canada have just witnessed the murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, probably, most likely, by the Indian state. And yet here you are meeting their minister and you're not even raising the issue. What on earth is wrong with you? Of course, it stings. I mean, to anybody looking at this even objectively, of course it stinks. And it does imply this same old, it's dollars before lives, before human rights. And that is the argument always that's playing out across the whole diaspora as we speak. Now, when I talk about this masterclass in lobbying, of course, on the other side, we have the Hindus, we have Hindutva, we have the Hindu Canadian Foundation, the HCF. Surprise, surprise, they're saying, no, this is absolute nonsense. What is more important is diplomatic ties between India and Canada, because we all win, commercially speaking. It's important that Canada increases its trade with India because dollars matter. And the statement that really made me chuckle almost in absolute disbelief is their statement that the World Sikh Organisation does not represent all Sikhs. Says who? Says the Hindu Canadian Foundation. Oh, really? So, I mean, what do they know? Again, it's just this complete overreach of logic. They have no right to claim that the WSO does not represent all Sikhs. Only the WSO can say otherwise, or indeed, where are all the huge clamour of voices from the Sikh community saying the WSO doesn't represent us? Where is that? If it was true, if that statement was true, that the WSO does not represent all Sikhs, then the HCF, I'm sure, would be highlighting all those huge crowds of Sikhs taking to the streets saying, no, the WSO doesn't represent us. We are with the Hindu Canadian Foundation. We are all for trade with India. We want trade with India. We don't care about human rights. There's a marked absence of those Sikhs. In other words, the HCF is just spouting the same old Hindutva propaganda. So it's very interesting that has actually come to light. And again, we've talked about how incredible, in the literal sense, Indian propaganda and Hindutva propaganda has become. Here it is. They are embarrassing themselves once again through the HCF in the public domain in Canada. They are making statements like, oh, the WSO does not represent all Sikhs. We need to forget human rights. It's all about trade. Well, I think the average Canadian is probably looking at that objectively, and I say the average Canadian who has no stake in the game on either side here, they're probably looking at this thinking, yeah, I think we can make up our own minds on this. Clearly, there is a human rights issue going on in India, and this organisation, HCF, whoever they may be, clearly they're just trying to bury the truth. So I think, James, as we almost say daily, the truth will prevail, as it always does, and this polarising discussion in Canada, I think the truth is once again rising to the surface.
Absolutely. And I mean, when you look at the reality of it, Angus, is that India needs trade with the world as much as we need trade with India as a whole. And to be able to look at it and say, all right, human rights are important. Human rights must be addressed. Now, if the Western nations, the United Kingdom, Canada, the US, all were on the same page and holding them accountable and pressuring them to start making improvements for the respective human rights, then they would be in a position where they want the trade, but they would be forced to make improvements. And that is, I think, the biggest concern of all, is the lack of any pressure by any of the nations to hold them to a higher standard when it comes to claiming to be a democracy, while at the same time suppressing minorities and ignoring human rights of their people. So I think that's an important definition. Now, as we've been looking at over the last several days, Angus, I've been talking about the different periods or the different perspectives when it came to the 1984 attack on the Golden Temple, as well as the Sikh genocide. And a part of that, I've been encouraging people to get involved with various, documentation and archive organizations, including McMaster University and others, to document and to bring forward not only physical documentation, but also lived experiences. And again, online, there is a growing database of these lived experiences where people are sharing videos going through atrocities, not only from the Operation Blue Star, not only from the genocides and the violence of 1984 and into 1985, but also throughout various periods since then, or continuing since then. I can't even say various periods, but continuing since then, the abuses of the Sikhs as well as the other minorities. And there is an organization called ENSAAF, and that is looking to end impunity and achieve justice on behalf of those who have experienced the human rights abuses, the organized disappearances, and the extrajudicial deaths that have taken place. So I wanted to share a video of one of those lived experiences, and just really encourage the viewers. Again, it's so important to document all of these atrocities and to make sure that the world is exposed to the reality of truth. And so again, I'm going to share a video here, Angus, and then we'll just do a brief overview and, talk about it briefly, but then we'll move on. But here's the video from ENSAAF, and you can share your stories with them at ENSAAF, that's ENSAAF.org online. So again, great organization trying to document history.
मेरा नाम कजिंदर कौर है जी ते पिता जी का नाम नराता सिंह है पिंड पमौर है ਅਸੀਂ ਤਿੰਨ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਕੋ ਭਰਾ ਸੀ ਬਲਵਿੰਦਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਉਰਫ ਪੱਪਾ ਤੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਨਜਾਇਜ਼ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀ 20/1993
कि अपने घर खाली करके गुरुद्वारे च आजो सारे घर दी तलाशियां लैनियां लईयां किसी नूं कुछ नहीं मिलिया है कोई ओह नहीं होया ते जो भी किया पुलिस वाले ने नजायज किया उस तो बाद पंचायती मैंबर गए लाश लेन भी कि साडे पिंड दा मुंडा नजायज तुसीं ओह कीता पंचायत गई सी लाश लेन सानूं तां घरे नहीं बनदा कहंदे उन्हां दे टीमियां नूं कुड़ियां नूं इत्थे पेश करो।
So again, as you can see, Angus, a very heartfelt story of a family that was victimized by the police in Punjab, as well as at the behest of the India government, and at the very least at the ignorance and willful blindness of the government of India. So again, it's so important, as I've said, that we've been looking at all of these different perspectives from around the world on the incidents of 1984 and moving forward. So again, we'll look at more of them next week of the international reports that were coming in and how the narrative has shifted over the last several decades. But again, over to you, Angus, in terms of your thoughts on it and where we think the importance lies in all of this documentation.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I have to say I'm very, very much aware of ENSAAF because I have dipped into their website and their archives on a regular basis. They have done the most absolutely fantastic work in helping to archive, organise, collate all that absolutely essential information, data, statistics about the extrajudicial killings, where they happened, the dates they happened, all the evidence surrounding those. Because this archive is so very important, not just for ensuring that the truth is revealed, but that it remains there documented forever so that people can learn, hopefully, from the dreadful period of the 80s and 90s in the Punjab so that it is never repeated. Now, we often say how many of the guilty are still walking free. Those perpetrators of some of the most outrageous crimes against humanity, against a whole young generation of Sikhs, they are still walking free. Many of them escaped justice forever by passing away since those times. KPS Gill, another prime example of that. The work that people like, or organisations like ENSAAF do are just so important in bringing people to justice. There are still cases going on in India of various individuals who are finally, after literally decades, being dragged in front of the courts for the events of November 1984, the genocide. So justice, as we say, justice delayed is justice denied. But at least if we are still dragging these old men to justice in India now, at least finally there is some element of justice being served, albeit at the end of their lives. Sadly, they have managed to escape. But it is evidence collected by organisations like ENSAAF that is absolutely vital. Firstly, in dragging these individuals to justice, and secondly, ensuring that they are convicted. Because quite often in these cases, many get off simply because the evidence is just not there, because it's too historic or it's been forgotten or lost. So again, another crucial imperative reason for the existence of organisations like ENSAAF. And let's not forget, in the same breath, individuals like Jaswant Singh Kalra, the Shaheed, the martyr, who literally gave his life doing exactly this work. He was assassinated extrajudicially, again, by Punjab police. He was tortured and murdered in exactly pretty much the same way as tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of young Sikhs were in the 80s and 90s himself. Why? Because he had been collecting the evidence, this very same evidence. He was, and again, the Indian state had done everything it could to hide the evidence, any documentation, any documentary proof that these extrajudicial killings had been happening. Kalra went out there. He realised, and just to quickly summarise his story, he worked in a bank in the Punjab, and he wondered why so many of his Sikh colleagues were just day after day just not turning up for work. They literally just vanished. And he thought, where are they going? And it turned out, yes, of course, they'd been extrajudicially murdered by the police forces. And he got the evidence by going to what's the word? The word escapes me. Crematoria, I beg your pardon. Have you seen him over there? He went around the crematoria and discovered in the records of the crematoria that there were these anonymous services going on for people who had allegedly no background. In fact, they were these young Sikhs being murdered by the police. And he then began to, even just in his local area, to document how many of these disappeared, had been quietly cremated and vanished from the record. He counted in his own region just 25,000. So that is what was going on, and that is what Jaswant Singh Kalra himself was recording and documented. And as a result of that, he was himself disappeared by law enforcement, and that is a name that we must never forget because of the work he did. And others like him. Jaggi, another individual doing pretty much the same sort of work. His website collated, again, this sort of information. He was collecting this imperative data. What's happened to Jagtal Singh Johal? He's now stuck in prison, being tortured by the Indian state for his efforts. So again, this is why we must never ever let this issue lie. We must keep supporting these organisations like ENSAAF. We must support these individuals like Jagtal Singh Johal, because it is they who are literally giving their lives to keep the truth alive, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And I hate to say it, but we're not getting any younger. And for those that were there in 1984, those who have witnessed atrocities since that time, again, we're not getting any younger. So it's even becoming more of a pressing issue and more of a significant importance that all of these records and all of these lived experiences get documented, because down the road, you never know when that type of information and evidence could be utilized to hold somebody accountable, or at the very least to ensure that these atrocities are never forgotten.
Absolutely right. And that is our responsibility here on this channel as well, just to keep the truth on the surface and keep digging out the truth for our audience.
That's right.
Right, James, let's move on, and really following the same sort of theme here in the UK. And of course, I did talk about the India-UK trade deal that was agreed in recent weeks between Starmer and Modi, and the bit of the backlash that came out of that. Well, in recent days, there was a parliamentary hearing to specifically discuss one of the elements that has, of course, been bubbling around in the public domain here. And, of course, the subject of what we're talking about today is transnational repression. So this hearing was held between a lot of members of Parliament here in the UK Parliament. And it was very interesting to note the visible presence of quite a large number of Sikhs who were there, because, of course, they have contributed massively to the investigations and the evidence required by these committees to discuss these very things. And as the committee was held, as the discussions unfolded, it was mentioned more than once by the chairman of the committee, Lord David Alton, that Starmer, the Prime Minister, has himself referred to the importance of investigating transnational repression, and apparently, allegedly, is carefully following the work of the committee and its recommendations. Is that true? We don't know. Anyway, the Sikh Federation UK, again, one of our main lobbying organisations on behalf of the community, have, of course, been heavily involved in this and providing information and evidence to support all the arguments and discussions. And they said that they had, around this committee hearing, they had a productive, informal engagement with witnesses and the members of that committee. And they are actually looking forward, well, unsurprisingly looking forward to the publication of the report and recommendations that will come out from this committee. And they have been assured that they will take into account the many written submissions that were given by the Federation, mentioning the involvement of the Indian government in transnational repression targeting Sikh activists and indeed Sikh MPs. I'll just play you just a quick excerpt from the committee. It did go on obviously quite a long time. I'll just play you just a minute or so of some interesting bits that came out.
Pleased to have the three of you with us. We're also well aware that these are very topical current issues, both before Parliament and within your department, and that the Prime Minister has himself referred to the importance of investigating the whole issue of transnational repression and is carefully following the work of this committee, and we're grateful to him for that.
Overinflating the risk would only serve the interests of our adversaries, instilling fear and stifling democratic freedoms. So let me end by reiterating that any attempt by a foreign state to intimidate, harass or harm individuals in the UK will not be tolerated, irrespective of the perpetrating country.
Okay, that was Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister, and the hearing went on pretty much in the same vein. Lots of questions, and he did reiterate pretty much the same thing over and over again. But just to give you the quick highlights from what came out of that discussion, the Prime Minister has referred himself to the importance of investigating transnational repression and allegedly is carefully following the work of the committee and its recommendations. Now, Dan Jarvis, that guy you've just heard, he said in his own words, any attempt by a foreign state to intimidate, harass or harm individuals in the UK will not be tolerated, irrespective of the perpetrating country. Strong words, and there were a lot of similar statements that he said along those same lines. And he also said the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the Security Minister are, quote, absolutely crystal clear that activity that amounts to transnational repression is utterly unacceptable and we will not stand for it. And I just have to insert my own editorial there. Avtar Singh Kandar. Anyway, that's another discussion. TNR is not widespread in scale, but is targeted at individuals. And I think this is true. I think transnational repression in the UK is limited in scope, but it is very targeted. And of course, looking at the Sikh population, we understand, of course, TNR here in the UK is India targeting specifically the Khalistan movement, amongst others within the diaspora, the Sikh diaspora. Interestingly, Canada features a lot in this, and it was stated that Canada takes the G7 presidency this year, and they, of course, have significant interest in transnational repression, and they have claimed publicly that they will make TNR a priority. So the UK is now working closely with Canada on TNR. They also said that they will strike a balance between appropriate levels of awareness of individuals and communities being targeted, but at the same time not creating what they call a chilling effect. In other words, what they're trying to do is not inadvertently spread fear and alarm amongst the communities. It's more about awareness, not actually about spreading fear. And as they say, it's not really to do the enemy's work for them. In other words, let's not create fear amongst the Sikh diaspora, because that is what India is trying to do. And the minister's promises to engage with vulnerable individuals and communities at every opportunity, and to provide reassurance and guarantee their democratic freedoms. And the Security Minister gave categorical assurance to the communities that the government does take TNR seriously, as it undermines UK's sovereignty, it is anti-democratic, it is illegal, and it is completely unacceptable. Now, great. I mean, all I would say there is we've heard it all before. These are ministers, MPs, politicians giving their assurances. Lessons will be learned. We will not tolerate. But as we have learned, James, from the past, we judge by results. We judge by actions. We have stopped judging by words because we've heard it all before. It's politicians' promises again. It's very easy to stand up in a committee as a minister and say, I will stand up for this. This is what I stand for. I will not tolerate, etc., etc. But what are you doing about it? Where are the results? Where is the evidence? And as I cynically inserted my own editorial there, Avtar Singh Kandar. For example, what are you doing about Avtar Singh Kandar? That is the most overt evidence of transnational repression in the United Kingdom in recent years. A guy who died in the most extraordinarily suspicious circumstances, literally within days of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Our counterparts in Canada, the government there, actually stood up, Trudeau stood up in the Canadian Parliament and directly accused India of murdering a Canadian citizen. What did the UK government do when Avtar Singh Kandar died suspiciously? It buried the story. It buried the autopsy. It ensured that any normal investigative protocols were stopped, were prevented from happening. West Midlands Police were diverted from undertaking a normal investigation into his death. Why? Those are the results that we talk about. Those are the results that we judge government activity on. James, in this, the UK government is talking, but it is not delivering. It is absolutely, once again, a prime example of we say one thing, but we do another, James.
Yeah. Absolutely, Angus. And let's not forget that it's not only the government of India that Canada has concerns with. I mean, we've seen it with Russia. We've seen it with Chinese police stations that were located in Canada. You have Iran, Saudi Arabia, and even countries that people don't realize, such as Turkey and Eritrea. And these are big issues in Canada, and they should be bigger issues around the world. But again, like you said, it's essential that they not use it to create a boogeyman where they start to instill unrational or over-instill a fear in the community, but instead keep a delicate balance of awareness, education, and the ability to report transnational repression without creating an unneeded fear. And I'm not going to say irrational fear, I should say an unneeded fear where it may not be in the best interests of any of the diasporas to do such. So again, just keeping that awareness, the education, and ability to report it. And then, of course, ensuring that all of the law enforcement agencies, whether it's in the UK, the US, Canada, have the tools to actually investigate appropriately and effectively.
And I think one thing that did come out of that committee hearing, which actually is, I think, very interesting and probably does give the Indian government some cause for concern, is the fact, of course, Canada taking the G7 presidency, and Canada have publicly stated that they will investigate TNR, that they are dealing with it. And well, if we give the UK government the benefit of the doubt, they have said that they are working closely with Canada, quote, on this whole subject. So despite, hopefully, public appearances that the evidence doesn't seem to support this case, we will give the UK government the benefit of the doubt, and the Indian government probably are suspicious then that the UK government is working with the Canadian government to identify operatives from the Indian secret intelligence agencies operating across the West, and that their activities probably will be known about and they will be uncovered. I have no doubt MI6 and MI5 are fully aware of Indian operatives operating here in the UK and, of course, across in Canada, as CSIS will know. And yeah, I think India's going to have to be a little bit careful now, because clearly there is a little bit more coordination going on between our various nations, and of course in the US as well. The CIA, no doubt, we do know, are very much on this subject. But let's move on, Jez. Let's circle back to 1984. And, of course, relevant to a lot of our discussions in today's show. This weekend, of course, does mark the anniversary of the unfolding in 1984, those terrible events at the Darbar Sahib, which led to tens of thousands of innocent men, women and children murdered by the Indian Army. And of course, the demise, a sad martyrdom of Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale and his colleagues, those brave, heroic individuals who were standing up again for their basic human rights. And for doing that, they were murdered in really a heroic last stand in the Darbar Sahib in those few days of June 1984. So as to mark those events, this weekend, as we have said throughout this week and last week, there are various rallies taking place. We do know they're taking place in San Francisco, as James has talked about. There is a big one planned in Trafalgar Square here in London, and posters are going up everywhere about that, urging our Sikh diaspora here in the UK, right across the UK, of course, from the Midlands especially, where we do have a large community. Get on those buses, talk to your local Gurdwaras. They're organising buses to get people down to London for the events, gathering at 11 a.m, and then there will be a march towards Trafalgar Square, where, of course, there will be speeches and various high-profile individuals in the community will be rallying the community and reminding the world, hopefully in front of the cameras of the mainstream media. Again, very important to get there because the cameras will be there. It highlights all the issues that we're trying to get across to the wider public, whether you're in the US, whether you're in Canada, here in the UK, or even down under or across Europe. It is important that the mainstream cameras see those Khalistan flags. Take your Khalistan flags. It is important that you talk to journalists if they ask you questions. Tell them what we're worried about. Tell them why you're concerned. Tell them about Khalistan. Tell them about all the things, these issues that we're trying to do. These are the events that are the interface between the community and the mainstream public, because these events are reported. People are interviewed and their comments, their issues are highlighted to the wider audience. That is why it's important that you get there, get heard, get seen. So, of course, we're talking about 1984. Now, one of the big issues here in the UK specifically about 1984 is, what did the British government do to contribute to those dreadful events of the Darbar Sahib in June 1984? We do know, thanks to a release of papers, almost an accidental release of papers in 2014, that we were involved to some degree. And as a result, in November 2017, the Sikh Federation UK did actually publish a really important report. It was called Sacrificing Sikhs. And it was based on the research of the UK government papers already released in the public domain. The whole purpose of this was to support this need for this judge-led public inquiry, which they are still lobbying for. Around 50% of the most damaging papers exposing the full truth have never been released. So it is those papers we need a judge to be able to release and read and then make a valid judgment on what the UK government did as part of Operation Blue Star. Now, this report that the Sikh Federation produced was actually personally handed to Boris Johnson, who was then the Foreign Secretary, just before he was giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee on that same day. And I've got a video here where Boris Johnson himself was asked by Ian Austin, who was a Labour MP at that time. And Johnson was asked about the Sacrificing Sikh reports, because he'd literally just been handed it, so he was fully aware of it. And this is, I just want to play you Johnson. This is Johnson's response in that committee after he was asked the question.
Mr. Austin, you go to.
Thanks. Just on India, what assessment have you made of the calls for a full public inquiry into UK involvement in the events of 1984? Have you seen this recent
Blue Star?
Reports? Sorry?
Is this Blue Star?
Yeah. So there was a report published this week by the Sikh Federation, very critical of the review conducted by Sir Jeremy Haywood that was commissioned by David Cameron. So I was just wondering whether you had looked at this and made any assessment of.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Austin. We have indeed, and I'm aware that there was a document found in the National Archives relating to Operation Blue Star, and the overall conclusion that the Cabinet Secretary made in 2014 was that the UK involvement was purely advisory, and ended several months before Operation Blue Star, had a very limited impact on events.
Yeah,
nothing we've found so far has contradicted that essential finding, Ms. Frost. And so we understand. Look, I've just been lobbied about it outside. Some members of the Sikh community gave me a pamphlet about. I understand the strength of feeling about Operation Blue Star, but hand on heart, we haven't found evidence to.
Could I ask whether you might be prepared to meet the Sikh Federation to discuss this? They published a report this week, and I think it would be worth you looking at that.
Well, I'm grateful to you if I can. Though, as I said, I have just been served with a copy of that.
It's about that. So
thank you. I will do what I can do.
So that's Boris Johnson saying hand on heart, but unfortunately this is a guy who has been shown up to be a complete serial liar. He is the consummate politician. He can speak very well, but basically he's been shown over and over again to just basically lied over and over on various issues, not even just this issue. But there he is basically denying, saying, no, there's nothing, we've found nothing, we've had a look at it and there is nothing there. Well, I'm afraid nothing to fear, nothing to hide. Well, have the inquiry. Let's prove it. Let's make the whole issue go away then, if you believe there is nothing there. And the Tories, the Conservatives here, in more than 6.5 years, realised actually that their position defending this was just was weak, and they have refused to meet even today. This is 2018, so this is 7 years ago. Since this report, the Sikh Federation UK and the community have lobbied particularly the Conservative government to meet and discuss all the evidence brought out in this report, the Sacrificing Sikhs report, and they have refused to even hold a meeting. Why? Why wouldn't they even meet? I think that, again, speaks volumes. And the weak position of the Conservatives was made clear during a 3-day hearing at an information tribunal that looked at the report and evidence presented by the Tory government. And the information tribunal judgment, and this was back in 2018, so it's shortly after this, accepted, quote, the strength of feeling of the Sikh community about the Amritsar massacre and its aftermath and any role the UK government may have played in it. And the Judge Shanks, ruled that there was very high public interest in disclosure, and he specifically acknowledged the limitations of the Hayward Review, as it was called, in terms of the speed in which it was carried out and the limited time period of the files that were looked at. In other words, even the judge said, look, no, this has been brushed over. This hasn't been investigated properly. There's clearly something going on here. It's suspicious. So in other words, we do need a proper inquiry. So the Sikh Federation UK has, as a result, continued its lobbying. It is actually mounting and mounting now, and I'd say that the pressure really is mounting on Starmer to deliver. And the Sikh Federation has said that Labour must now honour its promises. It cannot ignore the revelations in this report that they prepared that proves Parliament was actually misled by the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, and his Foreign Secretary, William Hague, back in February 2014. And the Historic Information Tribunal judgment against that, again, that was Judge Shanks, that ruled against the Tory government. So again, in all the evidence, not just in the Sacrificing Sikhs report that has all the evidence collated by the Sikh Federation UK, but even the Judge Shanks inquiry said, look, this must be looked into more closely, that even an independent judge said something is being hidden here, we must investigate this properly. So is Surrender Starmer going to actually be good to his word? You know my opinion on that. I think I've made it very clear. But the Sikh community still hold out hope and are still lobbying the government to say, right, it is up to you now to deliver on your promises. You're now in power. You're not in opposition now. You're now in power. So deliver that promise. Deliver that promise to launch a judge-led inquiry into British involvement in 1984 Operation Blue Star, James. I'm not holding my breath once again.
Absolutely, Angus. And unfortunately, it is the reality that a lot of documentation has since been destroyed. Even the UK government has acknowledged that there's more documentation that was in the archives that was destroyed by either the military or Defense Department somewhere through the years. and they claimed that it was just during a regular review and purging of documents. However, there's questions there to be had about why these were not digitized given the era in which they were being destroyed or potentially removed and purged. Why are these documents, even today, not being digitized on a full open basis as opposed to just selectively choosing what's being digitized and brought forward in the archives digitally?
And there has been almost a race, a slow race since 1984 to uncover these documents by the Sikh community as opposed to the government trying to bury these documents. And the same is unfolding in India. We have our respective governments just doing their best trying to, if anybody's aware of that game whack-a-mole, anytime anything pops up, the governments are trying to sort of whack it down, bury it. But in the meantime, we've got these foot soldiers amongst the Sikh community who are scurrying around trying to sort of uncover these bits of evidence, trying to release these bits of evidence. And every time a bit of evidence pops up, the government are there trying to hide it, trying to bury it back down. And that release of evidence in 2014 here in the UK was actually accidental, would you believe? And this is quite often how it happens, is because our national archives are enormous. And of course, our archives have all this documentary evidence of all the meetings, discussions, correspondence, etc., between various ministers, civil servants about various events. And of course, there are all this documentary evidence about what happened in 1984, in June 1984. And of course, these researchers, the archivists, they don't tend to read page after page. So quite often, documents are released accidentally where they didn't actually realise. And quite often they are redacted, that is, bits are blocked out. But that means they have to read every single page and remove everything that they think, we better not let the public know about that. Well, in this case, what happened, there clearly was so many pages of evidence that the archivist didn't actually look closely enough, and information that the government really did not want releasing was released accidentally. And well done to the Sikh community who were straight on it. They discovered this evidence that there was collusion between India and the United Kingdom, and they're on it and saying, no, there is evidence now. You accidentally released it. We want the rest of it. There are at least half the papers around this Operation Blue Star that haven't been released. What evidence is in there? We want to know, and we need it releasing. So that fight continues, James. Right, time marching on. Let's.
Absolutely, it does.
Sorry, James, carry on.
Oh, I just said absolutely it does, Angus.
Indeed it does, and we must continue the fight from our small corner as well to keep that pressure on. Right, James, loads of wonderful comments have come in. We've had some really good detailed comments, lots of interesting threads running. TC starts us off today, and again, we're talking about Surrender Starmer. He's put trade deals above human rights, Sikh lives. Yes, absolutely, and the irony is, as TC points out, Starmer, by background, is a human rights lawyer. And as you say, the paradox, this cognitive dissonance, as you call it, this contradiction for Starmer must be a bit confusing for Mr. Surrender Starmer. He allegedly stands up for human rights, and yet here he is. He's just gone and tied up this trade deal with one of the arch offenders of human rights, yes, Narendra Modi. It just doesn't sit right, does it? Absolutely. As you say, we need to call for a vote of no confidence in Labour. Now, I love this comment from Stay Safe, who says, actually, you're right, Starmer is unpopular, UK or abroad. He is absolutely, possibly one of our most unpopular prime ministers in history. And you actually predict he's going to be out. I think he will be out sooner rather than later, because he's just... anyway, I'm not going to go down that road. But it does depend on who the next government is likely to be. Now, according to the polls, and a lot of in the Sikh community are worried about this, that it's looking like to be Reform. The Reform, this new party. It is a right of centre party, and of course many in the Sikh community don't like Reform because they are anti-immigration, they are right-wing, and therefore almost by default they fear Reform. All I would say, do not fear Reform. And actually, when Reform were campaigning, they did actually have several Sikh candidates here in the UK standing for election. They are not anti-Sikh, and as you rightly say, Stay Safe, they stand for anti-immigration. But it won't harm Sikhs, as a lot of Anglo people, white Caucasian people it's called, praise the Sikh community as the best migrant community. And you're absolutely right. Even I know this for a fact, that the extreme right here in the UK, they express their ire. They reflect the right wing in India that hate the Muslim population. They are extremists right here in the UK, hate the Muslims. But they don't hate the Sikh community. They actually see the Sikh community as a community that they want to form friendships with. They actually respect, admire. They like the Sikh community, even the right wing, the far right wing I'm talking about. So that says an awful lot about how well the Sikh community hasn't just integrated, it's how much they've contributed to our great nation of Great Britain. Likewise in Canada, likewise in the US, same in Australia, New Zealand. This is what the Sikh community does. They have integrated so positively, and therefore the proof is in the pudding. And I love this final part of Stacey's poem. And look, even if Reform get in, even if Reform kicks out all the Sikh, the Sikhs here in the UK, where are they going to send them? Why? They've got to send them to Khalistan. They've got to campaign. If they are repatriating them, where are they going to repatriate them? To Khalistan, James.
Exactly, right? And, you know, what are we going to do? We'll have to be there to shake hands with some of the white guests because we're going to be in Khalistan as well. Looking forward to interviewing these individuals as they come in. But seriously, I mean, you know, whether it's Starmer, whether it is Carney, whether it is Trump, I mean, really, at the end of the day, we can switch politicians, but we still end up with politicians regardless.
Absolutely. Well, I think our audience knows our opinion of politicians. I love Puneet Dajoka, a long and interesting comment on this one. And this again follows a story about Starmer and politicians. And as you say, attempting to do politics in the limelight of media broadcasting makes him look pathetic. He's trying to copy Trump, but failing miserably. It doesn't suit him, absolutely. He sways with the wind, I think is your point, and absolutely right. He's such a poor quality politician. I'm no supporter of Starmer. I make no bones about that. I think he's one of those politicians that, as I love Puneet Dajoka says, he just goes wherever the wind blows. He revolves around wherever he thinks it will make him popular. He's not a principled man. And in fact, some people who work with him say this. He is not a principled politician. He doesn't stand by his own principles. He just goes where he thinks, whatever will make him popular. And as you say, the British political system is broken. It's just a revolving door between big business and the political class that's driven by greed and filling their own politics, their own pockets, beg your pardon. And you're saying absolutely right that our system, our democratic system here in the UK is just being broken. These politicians are being bought. A true politician is a servant of the people. They hold values such as prosperity and liberty for the people in high regard. Absolutely right. But our politicians, on the whole, do not seem to do that. As you say, only society should gain something, and not the politicians individually. It should be a measure of how well they're being served. Look at the last 25 years. We don't see much, but perhaps you've been asleep. No, you haven't been asleep. You're absolutely right, James. I think, certainly here in the UK, this is an accusation over the last 2 or 3 decades. The quality of our politicians has dropped dramatically. We have, I would say, possibly one of the most incompetent, useless, ineffective set of ministers, politicians in government and in opposition that I certainly in my long years can ever remember. I've never known a set of politicians so frankly useless than we have at the moment. Is it the same in Canada, James?
Absolutely, and I think that it's universal. And something that I've said many a times, Angus, is that we keep looking for smart politicians, but those that are smart stay the hell out of politics.
Yeah, I think that is the key point. The problem with our system is that our democratic system is not working well. Because somehow it is now attracting the wrong people into politics. We're not attracting those people who are very, very good leaders, who are very good managers. We should be attracting captains of industry into politics, people who are used to running large organisations, who are used to delivering results to shareholders, for example. They are held accountable. They know they have to deliver or they are out. And for some reason, politics instead is just attracting people who are in it for themselves, not for their principles. They're just in it for themselves. They're in it for the power, for the money, whatever you want to call it. And somehow they are not being held accountable. Our system is failing. I don't know what the answer is. Well, if I ran the world for 5 minutes, I would bring in a rule that politicians could only be elected if they had served in industry for at least 20 years. They had been successful industrialists for 20 years. They need life experience. They mustn't come straight out of university with a degree in politics. They must have had real life experience of paying bills, life experience of running companies, building companies, etc. Life experience of helping individuals through charitable causes, whatever it is. But people with real backgrounds, not people like we have now, James.
What's that I hear? Oh, I think that's Pierre Poilievre crying by what you just said.
Absolutely right. And Cool Dip Core, this is a lovely comment, a good detailed comment. Thank you for this. Being a good, kind, honest, loyal, hardworking citizen, it just doesn't get you anywhere anymore. After everything that British did to Sikhs, we are still loyal and we still speak highly of this country. Of course, our Sikh community has contributed so much. It remains deeply loyal. It contributes massively to the success of this country. Sikhs never complain. We don't have hate in our hearts about the injustice done towards us. Ending our Raj, looting, raping, bringing our only heir to the throne to the UK, of course, the young Maharaja, to ensure that Sikhs won't Raj again. It's time to admit that the feelings are not reciprocated. The British government, certainly the British state, does not reciprocate these feelings of loyalty back to the Sikh community. Starmer doing a trade deal says it all, refusing a public judge-led inquiry into the involvement of 1984, etc., etc. They are all, as you rightly say, called it a complete kick in the teeth and a body slam all in one, not to mention the intelligence on TNR. He's basically saying, I don't give a damn about you. I don't give a damn about what you're saying or asking for. I don't give a damn about the thousands of Sikhs who lost their lives in 84. I don't give a damn that India wants to ethnically cleanse you. I don't give a damn, etc., because you will always be good, loyal Sikhs to the British, no matter what we do to you. All these other people demanding repatriations, shouting and screaming about injustice done to them, need to be taken more seriously. We need to start protesting more and making noise. I think this comment sums up the issue of the Sikh community, particularly here in the UK, is that it doesn't matter what the Sikhs have done. It doesn't matter how much they do positively for the United Kingdom. And it doesn't even matter how much that the UK government just keep condemning the Sikh community. Nothing ever changes. And the Sikh community have just never been appreciated for everything they have done. Since, indeed, 1849, nothing really has been given back to the Sikh community by the British state. The British state have just taken, have condemned, have damaged, have done everything negatively towards our Sikh community, and never actually reciprocated the love and loyalty that the Sikh community have given to this nation. I think it is an absolute outrage, and I talk about it, rant about it regularly. Kuldip, likewise, has put it very articulately in one comment. Thank you, Kuldip, for this comment, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it really rings true when you look at the UK because of the longevity of the issue. And it goes back, such a long time, whereas Canada's still a young country. So we don't have the same history there. But I do believe that something that we've talked about quite a bit is that the Sikh community also is very proud to stand tall and to help others and to contribute. But they also are not out there tooting their own horns and ringing the bells, yelling at what they accomplish from the rooftops. And therefore, I think that it gets overlooked a lot because society as a whole doesn't really understand and comprehend the depths of which Sikhs have been contributing to the Western societies as well as to their own in Punjab and their history and culture.
Yeah, and I think history is the key issue here, James. Of course, in the Americas, your governments in the US and Canada actively support your Sikh communities. For some reason, the UK government works against our Sikh community. At every turn, they are always working against the interests of the community. Why? Well, that's the question I often ask. I think it is historically tied to the colonial rule of India and the continuing Brahmanical, effectively colonial control of India that has continued since. I think that is behind it. So Anyway, let's move on to our final set, and some great ones to finish off. Hardar Singh, thanks James and Angus, nice show. Justice denied is justice, or justice delayed is indeed justice denied. How often do we talk about that? And we've talked about that even on today's show. Yeah. Stay safe. James, being a complete technophobe, I am so impressed with this drawing of course, if you blur your eyes slightly, this is a clever something or other of Sant Janel Bindram Vale. How about that, James?
Yeah, I love it. I've seen a lot of this artwork over the years, but that one there is beautiful. I love it.
Well, I'm easily impressed, and I have to say I'm well impressed by that amazing piece of artwork. It's very clever. So well done for that. Thank you for that. But the final sign-off today comes from Sardal Singh. A lovely comment. This Khalsa is messenger of Almighty, but the Sikhs are messengers of the Khalsa. And yeah, indeed, this is this cascading of the voice of God. The voice of God, Waheguru, goes through the Khalsa, which in turn goes through every individual Sikh. And in turn, James, I think we can very presumptuously say that we indeed ourselves are just one of those conduits, maybe on behalf of the Sikh community as well. We form part of that cascading hierarchy. We're down at the bottom of that hierarchy, but in our own little way, hopefully we are getting this word of goodness, of the goodness of humanity via the Khalsa. We are doing our little bit to get the message out there.
Absolutely, Angus. I couldn't agree more.
And on that, hopefully, nice note, we will bring Perspectives to close for another day and indeed another week. So thank you for staying with us all week. Don't forget to watch my podcast released tomorrow. And the subject of that one is all about India's ingratitude towards the Sikh community. Yes, following a lot of the things we talked about today. So do keep an eye out for the podcast coming out tomorrow. But in the meantime, please don't forget to keep your comments coming in after our videos. Thank you so much for those. There have been some brilliant, really interesting comments, and we talked about many of them today. So keep comments like that come in. We love to talk about them. Do let us know your opinions and thoughts, and don't forget you can message us directly at message@satludgetv.com if there's anything you want to bring to our attention directly. But that is it for another week. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have of course been watching Perspectives. We will see you next week.